Hi, welcome to my talk about establishing a specification framework for API Management Federation. As you might see, this is the second iteration of a talk I already did at the API Days in London. So we have an evolution. So this is an evolutionary talk. So we will see different iterations over time and hopefully come to a conclusion how to deal with API Management Federation. My name is Daniel Kocot. I'm working for Codecentric in Germany, and I'm doing a lot of things with APIs, sometimes things with data also, but in the end, I'm doing a lot of API consultancy. So these are the topics I would like to talk about today. So understanding what API Management Federation really means, then what are the key components, then the need of having a specification framework. Then we move slightly the perspective because we look on this more from the business side. And we have a glimpse of how to implement a specification framework and what that could actually mean. So API Management Federation. It's an interesting topic because in the past, people thought, okay, there will be one solution to cover everything. But with multiple platforms, regions, business unit involved, this centralized approach was maybe not the best idea because I have a centralized management standing somewhere and I have everything else decentralized. So there is an idea of thinking how we really could federate the whole stuff. So having the decentralization, cross-platform integration, interoperability, and also thinking about scalability of a federated system, because we can really react because we have things more locally, and then we have the bigger approach of seeing a federated system. Why do we actually talk about this? Because the complexity is really increasing in the meaning of API ecosystems. So we have a lot of multi-cloud hybrid environments, but we have also very complex organizational structures. So there is a lot of things in regards of APIs covered by regions, business units, and so on and so on and so on. And we need more agility and flexibility actually there, so we can really quickly adapt changes in environments, in markets, or whatever to really bring up the whole thing in a more faster way. And with this federated approach, we can also improve security because we have standardized a bunch of security things there, and we can also ensure that the localized security controls are tailored really towards different regions. So we can deploy something which relies heavily for a specific region, but it is covered by the main set of standardizations possible. And when we look now at the key benefits in regards of having API Management Federation, we can really decentralize governance. We get into the mode of having a better scalability, and we are optimized for hybrid and multi-cloud environments. So can we really think about to manage APIs on a bigger picture and bigger level actually. And the good other part is, or the last part actually, to have tailored policies and customization. So what everyone wants to do in their regions, business units, and cloud environments, whatever, they can really have customized policies running there, backed up by having some kind of centralized agreed policies. So, and when we look at these two flavors actually and think about the possibilities we have, it's that we can see that there is some advantages to actually having the federated approach because it suits better for global and multi-cloud enterprises. So we don't have an enterprise using just one cloud. or just having on-prem or something like that. So it's a really mixture of things. And having a centralized approach on the other way in regards of API management, it's quite difficult to really think about potential bottlenecks, so a slower response times to changes and so on and so on. So it's really a different approach. We can still do centralized things when we are in a smaller and maybe less complex environment. So looking at the key components, why would we like to do API management federation? At first, it's because of API discovery. We really want to be sure that everyone in the organization is able to discover and register APIs constantly over multiple federated environments. The second thing is really the policy enforcement. We want to be sure that we can govern the API usage and that we can maintain control while supporting decentralization. So it's really clear that we want to do everything we have there. And on the third part is security still. So it's really important to enforce security, to have a consistent, robust security protocols there, and really ensuring that it's working all across the federated domains. When we look at having some kind of specification framework, so there's a need because it's really quite complex what we're dealing with here. And when we look at the challenges we have in the federated management, API management model, it's really about the inconsistent API discovery. We have problems to enforce policies, and we have a lot of security gaps across platforms because it's living on and on and on. So it's not standing still. So platforms are changing, and it might get that we have the possibility of getting into security gaps. So there's a real need to say, okay, I need something, I need to specify something, I need a framework to really think about how to deal with situations like these. And this is where a specification framework comes in. So it's nothing more than a set of standardized rules and guidelines that govern how APIs are discovered, registered, managed, and secured in these federated environments. In the end, having the specification framework, it's quite easy. It's doing a universal approach. And with this framework, we have the possibility to use a common language. So everybody is dealing with this common language. So we don't have specific protocols, specific configuration file specifications, so on and so on and so on. So just a common language set. Everybody can really understand what we are doing there. But we don't have to implement the technical side directly into that. So with having this standardized framework, we get consistency across all environments we are dealing with. We are able to scale fast. We improved security, or having improved security, we force interoperability, and last but not least, we streamline governance. So it's really clear that we can really streamline things there. So we simplify compliance with industry regulations and internal policies, so on and so on and so on. But we have a clear governance model. It's important because we have this increasing API complexity there, and we have the demand of agility and speed. So everybody is forcing enterprises to really deploy and scale services faster. And relying on a specification framework, however we call it internally, helps us to really do this. So it helps us to grow and to be faster, actually. Some weeks before this talk, actually, something happened on LinkedIn. Christian Poster came up. Maybe some of you might know him as the CTO, as the field CTO of Solo.io in that case. And He's not talking about federated API management anymore. He's talking about omnidirectional API management. Because what is happening? Normally, when we talk about API management, we look at the providing side. So we really want to push something out. But to be honest, even when we are a provider, we are consuming things. So we are consuming APIs, services, whatever. So we are not just dealing with one direction, we are talking internally and externally with APIs. So we have this omnidirectional idea, which still exists years ago. So I had conversations at the early beginning of the 2020s saying, okay, there is something we have to adapt because we are consuming stuff. Now everybody talks about API consumption and all the things around, but this is still the starting point. It's really interesting that it now comes up with the idea of having a federated API management because it triggers some parts and some things of it. Looking now at more a business-related side, talking about how we can deal with publishing APIs in a federated environment, really have to think strategically in the way of thinking about APIs. We at Codecentric highly believe in the idea of API thinking. It was something we developed with customers in the past, and now we adapt the things with the existing API ops cycles by Mariuka, actually. She also had a talk on the API days about that, saying, pushing the topic even further. So it's really about to understand the business needs behind having APIs. So we can deal with data definition, API endpoint implementation, and the backend implementation. That's easy task because this is software engineering. But the most interesting and most problematic part is the emphasization, to emphasize actually with the stakeholders. That's why we have an API business model canvas and an API value proposition canvas so that we can really make clear that the business is aligned. We have stakeholder collaboration all over parties of stakeholders actually, and it's looking on the consumer user perspective so that we really user-centric in this way. And when we look directly onto the API business model canvas and apply this to the federated API management, it's quite a good start to really identify the needs, define the segments where I'm working in, clarify the value I will create, and really tailor this to the needs of the federated systems. And then we had to outline the resources so that we make quite clear that we outline if we use shared or environment-specific resources and activities to really bring this API to life. And when we apply actually the API value proposition canvas into the framework, we can profile the first step, the consumers, really knowing who is using the APIs within the federated system. And we can really map. We can really map to say, okay, do we have developers who integrate APIs? Or do we have direct end users of API-enabled services or something like that? So it can solve specific pains and gains for the parties actually. And as the first step, we can prioritize our features and policies to maximize the volume delivery, to really make clear that everything works as expected. Now you might come to the question why we should do this. Because when we use such canvases, we can really align on strategy. We have this consumer-centric approach, and we really think about to have scalable value delivery. And by using the canvases, we enhance the collaboration between the stakeholders. So we're not talking about talking in open API and anything like that, which business parties normally don't really understand when they see even a representation of the open API file or an async API file, whatever, actually, a description. So we can really enhance and say, okay, we put everything into the canvas. This is what we learned from and understand from you by empathizing with you. And this makes it quite good to really move on and say, okay, we have this federated approach. We understand what you want to achieve. We know where this data comes from and how we can really deal with the situation. So we are really bringing the value to you. And this directly leads to the topic of implementing such a specification framework, actually. In the first iteration, we looked how we can really establish a framework. Now it's really ongoing with why we have to implement it, because we have to bridge theory. So we really have to move away from saying, oh yeah, we can do this like this. We really have to ensure that the framework now delivers value directly. And we have to minimize the risk there. So with the structured approach, we can really minimize risks and accelerate adoption of such a framework. And we align on organizational goals because we want to have success. So we are looking now at several steps of the implementation process, and you might find some you expected, and you might see something you maybe did not really expect. So the first step is really about assess the current API ecosystem. Ecosystem means the whole thing, not just having one management solution sitting somewhere in the organization. It's the real whole ecosystem of the organization. So it's really about to assess the current status quo. For this, we can really build an inventory of existing APIs. We should evaluate current tooling and then identify gaps actually, to really make clear we are lacking governance, we are lacking security, or even we are lacking integration. By having done this, we are now able to define and design the specific framework for the organization, which means we have to clarify the objectives. We really have to standardize the processes, really have to define how to discover, register, and govern an API. And we have to enforce policies to make clear that everything is secure and everything works as expected. By having now defined and designed the framework, it's in the third step to go and incorporate API thinking with the API ops cycle. So in the end, we have to think strategically of what we are doing there. So we have to treat API as business products, as digital products. We then have really to think about to automate the processes we talked about before in the second step, because with automation, we are able to streamline design, deployment, and the management. And then we have a line on the value to really make clear that everything works for consumer-centric APIs that bring value to us, to the company, to the organization, and to the consumers on the other side. In the fourth step, we just deploy the framework, actually doing a pilot deployment, think about stakeholder training so that really ensure that developers, operation people, business leaders understand what we are doing there, so they understand the framework. And we have to build up a business alignment. So we have to collaborate with product and strategy teams to ensure APIs align with organizational goals and market needs, so that we just don't build anything that's not really needed. So we build really something that is needed. And in the fifth step, and also the last one, it's really on monitoring the business success. So we have to track the impact to make clear that we have outcomes like revenue growth, user engagement, and also maybe market expansion driven by APIs so that we grow there. Then we have to gather the insights, collect feedback from both the consumer, internal teams to really redefine APIs we are offering. And then we have to evolve strategies upon that, so that we really have to update the framework to really align to the business priorities that might shift and even the market trends. Sounds easy. It has its challenges, because when we implement such a framework, we have the possibility of resistance to change, so that people are not willing to follow the principles, the ideas, whatever. So we have to engage early with all the stakeholders involved to make clear that they all understand what is going on in the organization. Then we can cover integration complexity. So we really have to invest in training there and robust tooling to make clear that everyone is able to use the APIs, the interfaces that are provided. We can also fall into maintenance compliance. So we have to automate compliance checks. That's mostly important, to really make clear that everyone is able to really use the stuff, so that we don't fall into the free risks. You maybe think, yeah, why is he not talking about tooling? Tooling is at the moment not really important. We are at the second iteration. So we really took just the framework in the first iteration, which was not recorded to different purposes, because it might look different to people and lead to misunderstanding, because we are in this iterative process. Now, with aligning together with the business, we are now able to look at the technical reference. So it's just a little sneak peek, just for short, what is actually meant by having a federation layer. There are some words on it, control plane, and so on, but please forget about that. We will see this coming up in the next year, so be aware of being with the API Days in Munich to see how this maybe then look like in 6 months, to really make clear, okay, they learn something, they put things together, because we're living in an unbundled world. So everybody talks about unbundling in the API world. That's something we have to cover in the federation layer, because in the end, we want to assure long-term success. So we have to implement stuff strategically. We have to monitor continuously, and we have to align on the objectives, actually. So really sure that we support organizational goals and scalability. Now you will say, oh, we are over. Yeah, actually, we are not, because federation continues. It goes on. It's an ongoing process. We have to talk about growing of the adoption of decentralized architecture, so more and more people go into that. We have to also think about the evolution of API specification standards. We have to look at the advancement of security protocols. Maybe there will be new one. And the most important part is federation goes beyond APIs. So API management or federated API management is not just a technical challenge, it's a strategic opportunity to really explore such and implement such a specification framework, because federated API management is moving forward. Thank you for listening.